Howdy folks, welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a healthy, delicious grain bowl. So the first step to really being successful in cooking is what we call mise en place. It's just a fancy French word for having your stuff all set up and put out where you need it. Okay, so for today's grain bowl, we're going to need a bowl, obviously. We're going to need a pot to make the quinoa or whatever grain you'd like to use in, and then also a saute pan, fry pan, right? Just a simple pan that we can cook onions, peppers, sear greens, or something of that sort in. So here are just a few things that I picked up at the store, just FYI. Some of these beans are 79 cents for a can. You can also pay about the same price, 99 cents, for a pound of dried beans, and you'll get twice the yield out of that if you just want to take the time to cook those up. You can look that up online. Some of these, you'll notice, we have a wide variety. We have pinto, we have garbanzo, I have some cannellini beans. You can also get dark red kidney beans, maybe some black beans like that. You can also get beans that are in chili sauce, whatever it is to your liking. We have some nuts here, FYI. These low sodium almonds, because they're often just too darn salty already. These low sodium almonds here were $3.69 for this can. Hopefully that can goes further. One thing to think about when it comes to nuts is we don't want to just eat nuts by the handful. They're good for you to have a little bit every day. So putting it onto a dessert or onto a grain bowl or into your hot cereal in the morning is a great way to stretch that dollar and improve your health. Also, a hint, for less money, I get a lot more nuts when I go with a cheaper nut like peanut, which in, reasonable amounts is still good for you. Now, I also stopped by the dollar store, got a couple little goodies that seem kind of fun. You could do, say, field peas and snaps. They have some different mixed bean and vegetables going on there. We also have boiled peanuts. Remember, peanuts, they're like beans. So you could throw a southern-style boiled peanut on that, too. Or you can get really crazy, go for a flavored peanut or these lovely chili lime toasted corn. Just add a little crunch. We'll talk more about that later. Also found some nice dried fruit. Sometimes it's just nice to have things that have a good shelf life on it. Speaking of shelf life, we have frozen corn. Now is the time, if in the summer, to get fresh corn, but you can also use frozen corn in there too. And what is hiding back here? Oh goodness, pork rinds. Yes, these make a wonderful topping for a lot of things, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later, because if you look at the nutrition facts, these can pack quite a punch, but we'll use them very, very sparingly just to add some crunch on top of our bowl. Alrighty, so here's our game plan. The anatomy of a grain bowl. Of course, we start with a bowl, and in the bowl we put these things: grains, greens, beans, extras, and boom. So what is the boom? I'm glad you asked. The boom is made up of a sauce that helps everything pop and liven up, and then also a lovely textural crunch, something chewy or crunchy. Usually crunchy is a good one to go with in the US, and that's what we call the boom. And next up is our selection of grains. I love the idea of an ancient grain, something that's been around for a really long time. You could go European, you could go African, or you could go American. So today we're going to be using quinoa, other grains, amaranth, I have buckwheat. You can buy these in bulk. You can buy them in a package like that, or you can even buy, if you're in a hurry, 90-second shortcut pre-cooked versions of this too. It can be a convenience food. It can be the cheapest option possible in bulk, or it can be something that's easy to find at Walmart, Target, or any grocery store. Our next part is the greens. You can use any greens. You can use kale. I like to shred mine up a little bit. You could use this. I got some spinach. If it starts to get a little funky like this, you could also saute or steam it. It could go on hot or cold. I also love parsley, surprisingly, as a grain. It's wonderful. If you have it fresh in the garden, it's easy to grow in a pot. Any sort of lettuce, anything. Our next step is beans. We have lots of options for this. You could go with a convenient route, maybe some black beans from a can. I do love dark kidney beans. I personally love lima beans. I might be the only guy in the whole world who does. Another great option would be lentils. The thing I love about lentils is that they cook up very, very quickly, and they're very inexpensive, and there are a lot of different varieties. This variety right here is a black lentil, which has a little extra tooth and a really wonderful flavor to it. Next up will be the extras. When I say extra, we're talking extra, anything extra you want to put on. This is where you put in the meats. Great place to use some leftovers. You could even do a soft-boiled egg. I personally love caramelized onions, especially if you combine it with some peppers. You can even add some frozen vegetables. Corn goes great with quinoa. I love some sauteed frozen vegetables on top too. And you could also opt for something a little bit sweet. Let's say that you have some pulled pork or barbecued chicken to go on top. It'd go great with some dried Honeycrisp apples to add a little bit of that chewiness and that sweet, tart, delicious pop of flavor. And last but not least comes the boom. And remember, the boom part has two parts. It has some sauce and some crunch action going on to make this thing pop. So I have an assortment of goodies here. Starting with the crunch, we could go the simple route with nuts. You can even at the dollar store get small packets of pecans, whatever you like. You could roast those nuts fresh. It's nice to toast them a little bit in a pan to bring out that nice flavor. You can add a little bit of seasoning to it too. Maybe you like to put a little spice, a little cinnamon, a little cayenne, something of that sort. So there's that crunch factor. Or you can use things like this toasted corn, which has probably a little bit of extra salt in it, but you're just putting a small amount on. Or today I'm going to use some pork rinds because I just, this is a luxurious food, and if we just eat a little tiny bit instead of eating the entire package or sitting down to eat an entire can of nuts, we just use a little bit, spread it out with everybody else in the meal, with a few meals, however we want to do that, then the impact is not as harsh for us. The other part is going to be a sauce. The easiest solution here is to do something along the sorts of a vinaigrette. My personal favorite is white balsamic vinegar. Not horribly expensive, but not as cheap as some others. You could also try malt vinegar, relatively cheap. Some red or white wine vinegars are nice too. You can find those cheap in the store. You could even go, if you have a high-end vinegar, sometimes it really showcases nicely on this. And then with oils, I love to use a little olive oil. If you don't have olive oil, any oil will work. If you want to add an Asian flair to it, you could go with a toasted sesame oil with all of that lovely roasty goodness. And I always love to add citrus. Just a little wedge to squeeze right over the top at the very, very end. So I prefer rinsing my quinoa. I want to rinse off any of those powdery little bitter components off the outside before I cook it. And we're simply going to add the quinoa to the pot. And for every cup of quinoa, we add 2 cups of cold water. Always use cold water. Bring it up to a simmer for about 12 to 15 minutes. And meanwhile, we're going to get the rest of our prep done. So we'll get our onions cut, other vegetables cut up. We can cut our lime or lemon into little wedges. I like these because these are easy to grab with one hand to pick up and then squeeze simply like that. So we're going to heat up the pan here, put a little bit of this lovely heart-healthy oil in there, and then we're going to add our onions or anything else you want to saute. Get a nice little brown color going on this. Keep moving a little bit, stir it around. Take your time, let them get nice and brown. Keep moving around. Just let that simmer away. Once it comes to a simmer like this, you can turn it down, just let that thing roll for about 12 to 15 minutes until it soaks up all of that moisture. The moisture's gone. I just take a small amount of these pork rinds. I try to cut it up gently. They crush a lot, but just try to cut it gently with the knife. Or you could smash them up in a plastic bag to sprinkle on top. And then, since I am a glutton for punishment, I like to throw a little bit of cayenne pepper on mine. Color is flavor, folks. Color is flavor. And speaking of color, why not add more extras? It's just some frozen veg, but I like to get some more colors in there. We don't want everything to be yellowish white. We want to add some reds. We want to add black, like the black beans, the green from lime and spinach. We want a lot of different colors going on here, so I'm just going to add that, and I'm going to put some extra corn in because I love flavors of corn and quinoa together. They complement each other so nicely. And a little Old Bay. Don't mind if I do. The beauty of a vinaigrette is its versatility and its simplicity. First, we take a little bit of French mustard. I like a pretty punchy, mustardy vinaigrette, so we'll drop some of that in the jar. I love using a jar to make vinaigrette because it simplifies the process. We're going to add a little bit of this white balsamic vinegar. We're going to cover that dollop of mustard, and then I'm going to add a light oil here. So I have a lighter colored oil, so I have 2 layers, and then a third layer, a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. So we have a little more oil than we have of vinegar. Finally, you can add just a little bit of salt, pepper, maybe some oregano or some herbs or an Italian herb blend, whatever suits your fancy. And then in order to mix this all together, you just take and you just shake this thing up, give it a good shake, and it works just as well as stirring. You see how I have a nice thick coating vinaigrette now. And our quinoa is turning out lovely. I just turned it down a little bit, but we're going to turn it down even more in a minute. As we boil off the rest of that water, we're going to fluff it with a fork. It's going to be lovely. It's almost there. Notice how some of these kernels are white and other ones look clear. You want them all to look somewhat clear. Well, the quinoa looks almost done. If you take and push it all off to one side, then you still see some of that liquid swirling around. Just be patient. It'll be ready in just 1 or 2 more minutes. And if you're in a hurry and you're using canned beans, you can have Chef Mike warm them up for you. That's Chef Mike Rowave. And this is the point at which you want to turn off your quinoa. There's about 2 millimeters of water in the bottom. We're just going to fluff it with a fork right before service. You can see all of the little grains are steaming hot, slightly translucent, not hard, white, and chewy. So we take our bowl, add our grains, 2 nice scoops, great serving right there. Then we add our greens. If they're fresh greens, I like to put them slightly off to the side. That way we can drizzle that vinaigrette sauce all over everything. Next up, our protein powerhouse combo, which is the quinoa and the beans. Just gonna dump that on the hot side here. Then look at all that color we got from cooking that. We're gonna add our extras. We're gonna take and throw that right over the middle of this bowl. Get it on top of those greens a little bit too. And next up comes that 1-2 punch, the boom. We're going to put a little bit of this vinaigrette. We have to get a little bit on our greens. We want to let a little bit run through our extras and let it drizzle slowly down into that quinoa to flavor it. And the second part of our boom, oh, I better not touch my eye later. We've got our pork rinds here over the top, add a little crunch. We're going to take some of these puffed corn snacks. We'll throw some of that action on there. And then last but not least, I'm just going to place a few wedges of citrus on top. So when we serve this, whoever is eating it will just take and squeeze that citrus right over the top to give it that fresh little pop of bright citrus flavor. So folks, I hope you enjoyed that. We made this wonderful, lovely quinoa bowl, and it really only took about 15 to maybe 20 minutes to really assemble all the ingredients and cook everything off, because the quinoa takes the longest time to cook. and we have some crunch, we have some color, we have bright yellows, and we have muted yellows with the quinoa, we have some green, we've got black with the beans, green peas and beans, caramelized onions with all that flavor, and that little crispy pop of salty, spicy, and tart on top. I have some cayenne pepper on just that little pinch of pork rinds on there, just to add that luxurious little top to this thing. And aside from the pork rinds, I didn't actually add any meat to this one, but you can easily put in some leftover chicken, or maybe you like shrimp, you get the small shrimp, saute a few of those up and put it in there, but it really doesn't need it because you get a nice dose of everything you need as far as protein is concerned between the quinoa and the beans. Bon appetit, folks.